John 14, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I'm going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. Jesus said to him, have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. But if you do not believe, believe me because the words of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If in my name you ask for anything, I will do it. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thank you, Nancy. And, it's just that it happens. It's okay. It's all good. So, as we looked at this text on Thursday at Bible study, we got to talking about the last line, and Jesus promised that whatever you ask of me in my name, I will do it. And, and some of the issues with that, actually, as we talk about how do we not make Jesus into this kind of cosmic vending machine? And it's a discussion that I've been in with lots of folks. Or what do we do when we ask Jesus to do something and it doesn't happen? And so we spent quite a bit of time on that. And it's not unusual for that line to get us to spend a lot of time thinking about that. It just kind of just glares at you. But I think this text is, I know this text is way more than just that one line. And even our discussion on Thursday really showed me how, as human beings, when there's something that just kind of catches our eye, that's new and shiny or dangerous or whatever it is that gets our attention, we start to forget everything else around it. And it happened to us on Thursday, and I really, after that conversation toward the end at that Bible study, I think I said to the group something like, I'm really struggling as a preacher, because every time I want to start to put a sermon together, it turns to the new dangerous shiny thing that we're just all consumed with, the coronavirus. And I'm starting to think in my head, I just feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. And so I really looked at this text and said, what else is going on here that would help me to be able to start to pay attention to something else? And what is that something else that I really need to be paying attention to. And for me, as I looked at this text and studied it and thought about this, I was drawn to a commentary that invited us to think about the dwelling places in a little different light. So this text from John is it's one of those go-to texts for funerals, because it really there's great comfort in thinking of Jesus going to prepare a dwelling place for us or for our loved one who has died. And it's a comforting vision of thinking about living together with Jesus in eternity and in paradise. But Jesus was telling this to his disciples, and they were talking about this Jesus preparing a dwelling place in the midst of Jesus doing his farewell discourse, preparing the disciples for the next stage, the next phase, the next step in Jesus' ministry, the cross. And the cross was going to be this terrible, awful, attention-grabbing scene. It was going to be all-consuming for the disciples. And we know that as we look through the story, especially in John, right, is that the disciples, they were hiding. The disciples were so, on the road to Emmaus, were so tied up in their grief, they didn't even recognize Jesus standing right next to them. The cross had become that all-encompassing, the death of Jesus, that all-encompassing thing that they just couldn't tear themselves away from. The other thing that commentary pointed out to me was that Jesus' idea of dwelling places in John, the word that's used for dwelling places, is linked grammatically to the John concept of abiding. Abide in me. And when we start to think about the dwelling places as something more than what comes later, but as a vision of Jesus preparing a place for us in God's family now, it gives us that something else to pay attention to. Jesus is preparing his disciples to not get hung up on the terrible, dangerous, awful thing that's happening right in front of their face, but to open up to that their identity, who they are, and what has happened over these last 3 years is not completely defined by that one terrible moment. Jesus is giving them permission to admit that there are things they cannot control, that there's no comfort in, or there's to not seek comfort in a false sense of security. It's to turn their attention from the terrible threat and turn it toward the actual power in their life, which is this dwelling place, this abiding place, this status that cannot be taken away in the family of God. And to start and to see each other as all being in it. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. I'm going to prepare a place for you. Jesus is in the process of building an abiding place for every single human being. It's limitless. We don't have to say that there's some cap on the number of people who can abide with Jesus, because he's continuing to build a place. He's continuing to welcome more and more. In fact, every single one of us to abide, because there's plenty of room. And that's a power to pay attention to. Because the reality is the disciples are about to embark on a journey, even after they've seen the resurrected Christ. It's going to find them arguing with one another. What does it mean to be followers of the Messiah who died and rose? There's going to be arguments between families of do we have to follow every single one of the traditions and the laws of our Jewish forefathers, or is there something happening? What do we keep? What do we set aside? And how do we welcome in the people who have a background that's not in the same heritage that we are in? And all of those questions are going to swirl around them. And there's going to be church fights, even after the death of the apostles, as the church fathers struggled and wrestled and wrote creeds and got in fistfights. Look it up, it happened. All of those things start to happen. And it probably seemed like, especially at the beginning, this whole fragile thing is going to fall apart. And maybe even as things got more established and we get to things like the Reformation and people start to have fights and arguments and there are wars started and all of this chaos is happening and it might even seem like the whole world is going to fall apart, that this faith, this church, this movement is breaking apart at the very seams. And Jesus' words come through every single one of those moments. I go to prepare a place for you. There is a place for you in God's kingdom. There's a place for all of you because there are many, many dwelling places. It's not the temporal threats that come at us, at society, at our church, at our faith. Those things cannot stop the reality that there's a place for you in God's kingdom and a place for everyone in God's kingdom. All of us are God's children. We don't look at each other through the lens of the current chaos that's around us, because you know what? When this chaos is done, when this threat is away, we've got other ones that are coming. There will be other times that we're going to find ourselves as a society facing some kind of a threat somewhere, and we're going to be so wanting as human beings to look at that threat and that consume everything we do and forget that there have been threats before, there'll be threats later, and none of them have stood against any of us. And there is something else way more important for us to focus on. It's the abiding love of Jesus Christ. That through wars and rumors of wars, through pestilence, through sickness, through pandemics, through whatever it is, even church fights and theological arguments that lead to fisticuffs, God's abiding places are there every single time. And we all have a place there in God's kingdom. And it's our gift. It's our gift to be able to focus on that, to be able to focus on the abiding love of Christ and the place that's made for us in God's kingdom, even in the midst of the things we can't control, the things we can't stop, the things that seek to destroy us. Nothing destroys that. And it changes for me the way I look at other people. Yes, I don't check my brain at the door and not wash my hands or wear a mask in appropriate situations or physical distancing or whatever it is for what I need to do at that particular moment. But instead of looking at the person that I'm with as a threat, I look at them as a child of God. And it changes the way I think about society, changes the way I think about that person. That person has a dwelling place in God's kingdom too. We're neighbors, we're family, all through Christ. And now I'm not treating you as a threat, I'm treating you as a fellow sojourner through this moment, whatever it happens to be. And together, instead of focusing on just being consumed by fear and trembling and frozen in place, we're moving forward. We're moving forward toward the dwelling place that Jesus has promised each one of us. And we know the way. We know the way. The way is Jesus Christ.